Started with the reading of the agenda. We only have two, aside from the presentations, we have two presentations aside from the voting items. So without any objections, we could get started with the roll call and proceed with the public comment.
Councilmember Brosette, Chair, present. Councilmember Moreno is present. Councilmember Giarrusso. Councilmember Gisselson-Palmer. Councilmember Nguyen.
Present.
We have 3 members and a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Harang, and good morning to all of you, and welcome to the Budget Committee Audit Board and Review for today, Wednesday, March 17th. Time now is 10:35 a.m. Mr. Harang will read the agenda in its entirety. Afterwards, we will take a 30-minute recess to receive public comment. To submit a public comment, we ask you to visit council.nola.gov. Public comments are limited to 2 minutes. Read out loud. Mr. Harang will read the comments for each item at the end of that agenda item presentation. Mr. Harang, you can proceed with reading the agenda. Mr. Harang, I was correct on that recess time?
30 minutes works for the recess time. The agenda for the March 17th Budget Audit Board Review Committee meeting is as follows. 1, roll call. 2, approval of the minutes from the February 4th, 2021 meeting. 3, presentation, status update on 2019 annual audit. To present, Brandy Smith, Director, Postal Weight in Netterville. 4, motion number M21101, authorizing extension of the audit contract and issuance of the new audit RFP. 5, presentation, sales tax collections, 2020-2021 analysis by industry. To present, Norman White, Chief Financial Officer. 6, motion number M2199, amendment to the classified pay plan. Public Works, Roads and Drainage Maintenance Superintendent, adopted by the Civil Service Commission on January 25th, 2021. 7, motion number M21100, amendment to the classified pay plan. Police Crime Laboratory Director, adopted by the Civil Service Commission on February 15th, 2021. 8, ordinance calendar numbers 33,255 and 33,256, introduced on March 11th, 2021 by Councilmember Brosette by request. These ordinances amend ordinance numbers 28,550 MCS and 28,551 MCS as amended, entitled an ordinance providing an operating budget of revenues and expenditures for the city of New Orleans for the year 2021 to appropriate federal grant funds from intergovernmental transfers to the fire department for the assistance to firefighters grant, the fire prevention and safety grant, and the fiscal year 19 port security grant, and otherwise to provide with respect thereto. Item 9, ordinance calendar number 33,257 by Councilmember Brosette by request. This ordinance amends ordinance calendar number 28,551 MCS as amended, entitled an ordinance providing an operating budget of expenditures for the city of New Orleans for the year 2021 to transfer funds within the Department of Parks and Parkways budget from personal services to other operating towards the purchase of supplies and equipment, and otherwise to provide with respect thereto. Item 10, ordinance calendar number 33,258 by Councilmember Brosette by request. The ordinance amends ordinance number 28,551 MCS as amended, entitled an ordinance providing an operating budget of expenditures for the city of New Orleans for the year 2021 to transfer funds within the New Orleans Recreation Development Commission's budget from other operating to personal services to properly fund personnel supported by millage funding and otherwise to provide with respect thereto. Item 11, ordinance calendar numbers 33,259 and 33,260 by Councilmember Brosette by request. These ordinances amend ordinance numbers 28,550 MCS and 28,551 MCS as amended, entitled an ordinance providing an operating budget of revenues and expenditures for the city of New Orleans for the year 2021 to provide grant funds awarded by the Department of Health and Human Services to the Mosquito, Termite, and Rodent Control Board for the CDC Environmental Public Health and Emergency Response Grant Program, and otherwise to provide with respect thereto. Item 12, ordinance calendar numbers 33,261, 33,262 by Councilmember Brosset by request. These ordinances amend ordinance numbers 28,550 MCS and 28,551 MCS as amended, entitled An Ordinance Providing an Operating Budget of Revenues and Expenditures for the City of New Orleans for the year 2021, to appropriate federal grant funds awarded to the Department of Health by the Unity Safe Home Rapid Rehousing Grant Program, to provide rapid rehousing case management to homeless individuals and families, and otherwise to provide with respect thereto. Item 13, budget reports, CAO Finance. A, personnel spending forecast. B, revenue collections report. C, operating expenses, available balances by department. D, status of current workforce. Item 14, other matters, and item 15, adjournment. And let the record reflect that council members Jeruso and Gustafson Palmer have joined the meeting as well.
Thank you, and welcome Councilmember Jeruso and Councilmember Palmer. Thank you, Mr. Haran. With that, we will now take a 30-minute break for public comments. It is now 10:40 a.m. and we will reconvene at 11:10 a.m. See you then.
Council members, we are at 30 minutes and we can reconvene.
Thank you, Mr. Harang. Would you please reestablish the call?
Roll call. Councilmember Brosette, Chair, present. Councilmember Moreno, present.
I'm present.
Councilmember Jeruso,
Here.
Councilmember Gissison Palmer,
Present.
Councilmember Nguyen.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. And we could go to agenda item number 2. If we could now have approval of the minutes from the February 4th, 2021 meeting. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Been moved by Council President Moreno, seconded by Councilmember Jeruso. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? None. 4 yeas, 5 yeas, no nays, and the motion is approved of the minutes. Next up, let's move to right quick to motion number 4, 21-101. I'll let Mr. Harang, our Council Chief of Staff, briefly explain authorizing extension of the audit contract and the issuance of the new audit RFP. This authorizes the end date of the audit contract for 2020, and it also authorizes a new request for proposals for the 2021 audit in 4 subsequent years for 2021 to 2025. Mr. Harang, do you have anything to add?
I think the summary speaks for itself. This extends the audit contract to complete the 2020 audit and authorize the 2021 audit. Calvin Aguilar, our fiscal officer, is on the line if there are any questions.
Yeah, just to clarify a bit, the current contract is the 2019 audit. It is now beyond the end date because the end date usually ends in the January of the following year. So we're into March now. So we need to extend that date to allow the vendor to continue invoices against that contract. The motion also is asking for authorization for a 1-year extension so we can move into the 2020 audit once the 2019 audit is completed. And because of the time constraints based from the pandemic and the other issues with the system, we weren't able to issue an RFP last year. So what we're gonna do is issue an RFP this year to follow up on the audits for 2021 through 2025. So that's the 3 items that's being asked in the motion.
Thank you, Calvin and Paul, for that explanation. Are any questions? Hearing none, I would move adoption.
So moved.
Need a second? Well, moved by Councilmember Jeruso, seconded by myself. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 5 yeas, no nays, and the motion is approved. We move on to, well, is there any public comment, Mr. Harang?
Apologies, no public comment on this item.
Thank you. The motion will move to full council. Back to agenda item number 3, we will have a presentation from Brandy Smith, Director of Postway Netterville, who will provide an update for us on the city's 2019 comprehensive annual financial audit. Of course, the state requires the cities to engage an independent auditor to perform our comprehensive audit. Its purpose is to provide a financial transparency through a complete and accurate accounting of the city's financial management. As you heard earlier, there's been several delays in compiling our 2019 financial audit, which is why I requested Postaway and Netterville to provide us with an update on the audit status. With that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Brandy Smith. Ms. Smith, you could proceed. Good morning.
Good morning. Like you mentioned, the audit, normally the legislative auditor gives you a 6-month deadline to submit your final report to the LLA. So the original deadline for your 19 audit was originally June 30th, 2020. So in that time, since the city has requested and was approved for several 3-month extensions. So the latest extension was approved through March 31st of this month. The audit will not be completed by then, so the city will be required to request another extension from the LLA. Just to give you an update on the audit status, we received preliminary trial balances for most of the funds for 2019 in late January 2021. However, accounting was still in the process of recording adjustments and reconciling several accounts. We received final trial balances for most of the funds within the last couple of weeks. However, we are still waiting on final trial balances for the general fund and the capital projects funds, which are 2 of the funds that have the most activity and transactions recorded in them. Accounting expects to have trial balances for those 2 funds by next Thursday, March 25th. So in addition to the financial statement audit, we also perform a compliance audit of your federal grants, and this is called the single audit. We previously received a preliminary schedule of federal grants for 2019. We are waiting for the final schedule of federal awards to finalize which grants will have the test for the single audit. So we've done some preliminary procedures, but we really need that final schedule to determine all of the grants that we'll have to test for 2019. And the other significant item I would say related to the 19 audit is the capital asset reconciliation and the related supporting schedule. And accounting also expects to provide that information to us next week. So once we get these final documents, we'll have to perform our final audit procedures, go through a review process, and also draft the audit report. If we find any errors or potential adjustments during our audit procedures, that may require us to do additional testing. So, if we don't have any significant issues identified in the process of our testing, I would anticipate that we would be able to complete our audit procedures by mid-April and issue our final report by early May.
So do you foresee any roadblocks between now and submission of the report by early May, barring any retesting?
I don't foresee any, but it really just depends on if we can get everything as promised by the end of next week. The information that we've looked at so far, we haven't found any significant issues, but we really don't know until we start getting in and looking at some of the details in the documentation to see if we see any differences, anything that would result in us having to do more testing. So at now we can't say, but I'm not aware of any issues.
And would you say that all the information is I guess even beyond the date that was supposed to be submitted, with all the different issues the city we've gone through, requested information is being turned over? Is that correct?
Correct. Yes, there were some delays earlier on, but since January, we have been receiving information. So usually each week we get more and more information. So there are some big items, like I mentioned, that we are waiting on, but we have, made a lot of progress, I would say, since mid-January.
Mm-hmm. And to date, the legislative auditor has granted, of course, all extensions.
Correct. So, we don't know what they're going to do for the next extension request, but they have approved extensions through March 31st.
Well, please give us, continue to give us, our fiscal office, the necessary updates on the status of the 2019 audit. Council members, are there any questions? Councilmember Palmer.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here, Ms. Smith. Can you tell me, again, so we have an extension until March 31st, is that correct?
That's correct.
And do we think it can be finished by March 31st?
I don't believe so, just because we are still waiting on the final general fund trial balance and capital projects fund trial balance, which we're expecting to receive by the end of next week. So that would not give us much time to complete our testing for those funds.
Okay. What is your expected timeline for completion then?
So if we get everything by the end of next week as promised, that we think it'll take about 3 to 4 weeks to complete our audit procedures, and then we would still need another week or two to draft the final financial statements audit reports. So we're thinking by end of April, early May.
Okay. And then, so I just want the public to know this is 2019. This isn't even 2020. So then, okay. How are we concerned at all that this could affect our bond rating?
I'm not familiar with the bond rating, so I'm not sure how that would impact.
Councilmember, Budget Chair, I know that in other municipalities, that's been an issue in terms of having audits done timely and turned in. I know we're dealing with a pandemic before a lot of this. I just want to know if we are concerned with that or if the administration is.
Mr. White is on the line, Councilmember Palmer.
Yes, through the chair. Thanks for the question. I mean, we're always concerned about what can happen, and you're correct that we've had a pretty phenomenal year, right? It's been an arduous process to put this together. And so we made contact with the rating agencies prior to this. You know, they did an evaluation and they sustained our current rating. However, we look forward to talking to them in the near future to go over these things. And at that point, I think we'll have completed the fiscal year 2019 audit and have some significant information regarding 2020.
Okay, so we've already started the 2020 process?
Well, with the system, if we go back, and not that we have to mention these things, but we kind of all understand the difficulties. But the system, it is a new system. So part of the problem is preparing a new system to begin to deliver its first financial statement. That preparation will help expedite what will occur in 2020. So yes, we're starting to reconcile a lot of our accounts to make it easier and more timely with completing the 2020 information. However, if we go into conversations about where we think we are financially, we'll be able to discuss that with the rating agencies.
Okay, great. Would it be, Budget Chair, would it be appropriate that after the administration has a conversation with the bond agency, that they would come back to us in our next budget committee hearing to give us an update on whether or not we would be affected? Would that be appropriate?
We're always welcome to have Councilman Mr. White, our finance director, provide us with the status of our accrediting agencies and how they're rating us. So that's always welcome at every monthly meeting.
Okay, Mr. White, would that be appropriate next month at next budget committee? Would that give you enough time to have those conversations?
Well, I think given the fact that we're going out to offer some bonds, it is going to require conversation with the rating agency. So I would defer it to that point. And
Okay.
I think what they will do will publish the information, but I want to ensure that we all are aware it's multiple things in which the rating is resting on, right? And so I think it would be important for them to issue their report, for them to give you a broader understanding of why they made certain assertions regarding the outcome. But as we move forward with the bond piece, I think they will pretty much write that and it'll appear out. But I have no problem with appearing before this body.
When you do have those conversations, Mr. White, would the fact of the stimulus funds that we're going to be getting in directly also play into that?
Well, I think not just the stimulus, but I think it's most important to understand what we do with the stimulus, right? If we're prudent and wise about how we're protecting our going concerns, meaning that as the revenue has not returned, the expenditures certainly will increase because we still have those needs. If we kind of invert that cost and create what we call a structural deficit, then I'm assuming they will act as you previously stated. If we are wise with it to ensure that we're managing our growth of expenditures and ensuring the recovery of our revenue from a long-term perspective, I think they'll see that as positive and may go the opposite way. So I think the jury's out on that.
Great. Thank you, Mr. White.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. White. Ms. Smith, do you have anything to add?
No, I don't have anything else.
Seeing no more other questions or comments, thank you, and we appreciate all the auditors for their work, and we look forward to the completion of the audit, and please keep us informed. Is there any public comment, Ms. Orang?
We have one public comment on this item. Give me 1 second to pull it up. This comment is from Justin B. Schmidt, not a paid representative. Perhaps the committee could take this opportunity to ask Ms. Smith why the corpus of the 1914 Edward Wizard Donation Trust, which was terminated on August 4th, 2014, has not been reflected in the annual audits from 2014 to 2019, or why the entire fruits of the trust corpus, the 50,000 acres of land, including the port of Fouchon, have not been recognized by the city for the years 2015 to 2019. At a minimum, the events surrounding this issue should be explained in the notes of the audit. As I have previously shared with the council, Ms. Smith should be aware that according to the terms of said trust, confirmed by the September 18th, 2014 opinion of the Louisiana Fourth Circuit Court of Appeal, which is final and no longer appealable, the city should have received an additional $20,594,065.11 in revenue for the fiscal years 2015 to 2019, $4,312,371 in 2019 alone, but it did not. A discussion of this issue needs to be included in the pending 2019 audit. And that's the only comment on this item.
Thank you, Mr. Harang. Next up, we will, right before we jump to the sales tax collection analysis by industry, agenda item number 5. Thank you, Ms. Smith. We will go to these civil service motions. Agenda item number 6, motion 2199, amendment to the classified pay plan, Public Works, Roads, and Drainage Maintenance Superintendent.
This is Robert Hagman from Civil Service.
Good morning, Mr. Hagman.
And hey, good morning to y'all. The first item is a new job classification for the Department of Public Works. It's called the Roads and Drainage Maintenance Superintendent. This is basically being established to provide a high-level supervisory position to support the engineer over the streets maintenance division. The purpose of this new job classification is to help the department build in-house capacity to reduce its reliance on contractors, and also to provide support services where needed. It's being established at the rate, pay grade 85, and it has a range of, the hiring rate would be $62,390 to a maximum of $92,856, and that maximum is like the top of its range. And so the Civil Service Department is asking for the committee's approval for this pay plan amendment.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hagman. Councilmember Jeruso.
Yeah, the only question, Mr. Hagman, I have is it also meant to expedite projects as well, the hiring of this position? I mean, management is great, but also the other pieces, once they get started, making sure they're completed in a timely fashion too.
You are correct. Basically, sometimes there'll be contractual work and it's like a little bit of like ends that are like missing. So this person will be that boots on a ground position to provide that, that support to expedite, projects.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I have a follow-up to Councilmember Gerusso's question.
Thank you, Councilmember Druso and Council President Moreno.
Thank you so much. So, so just to follow up, you said this is like boots on the ground. So you're saying that this person is not just a back office person. This person actually goes out to projects to see what's going on, how quickly they're moving forward. Is that right?
You are correct. Remember, this is a general. My understanding is it's a general fund position, and basically this position support, if you want to say supervisors, subordinate crews. This makes sure, in effect, the inspectional and quality assurance in the construction work being done is up to the city standard. So this is going to provide that additional support to kind of free up the engineer over the public works maintenance division. This basically provides that boots on the ground quality assurance support. It's a very highly technical, but it's also that boots on the ground position.
No, I love this. I think this is really positive. Are they also, is this position also take a look at specific contracts with contractors to make sure that everything is up to par in compliance with these contracts? Make sure that they're not, putting in place a bunch of change orders, things like that, oversight over those items?
I think it would have a role, but I think that type of, when you get into change orders, I think that basically you're going to knock it up to another administrative level supervisor. But this person will be, if you want to say, the first high level troubleshooter with regard to issues relative to streets and roads and drainage construction.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilmember Moreno. And Mr. Hagman, is this the first of its, well, I imagine it's the first of its kind, but this is only one position, correct?
This at this particular time, the idea is to grow and expand. Remember, the Public Works Department, right now is only a fraction of what it was, say, 20 or 30 years ago. This position provides that added, if you want to say, first series to, in effect, deal with the issues that Public Works has to deal with. So this is basically the first step, and there may be many more steps down the road. But this basically gets the feet wet to basically, if you want to say, review construction type activities.
All right. Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve? Oh, Mr. Harang, are there any public comments?
No comments on this item.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Councilmember Moreno moves to approve, seconded by Councilmember Druso. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
5 yeas, no nays, and motion 2199 moves to the full council. Next, agenda item number 7, motion 21100, amendment to the classified pay plan for Police Crime Laboratory Director. Mr. Hagman?
This is a expansion of the hiring rate of the current job class of Crime Laboratory Director. I don't know, a few years ago, the City Council approved a DNA series, and this was sort of distinct from the regular work, that criminal laboratory work that's performed by the criminalists. The goal here is basically to let the Crime Laboratory Director direct both areas. So it's basically an expansion of its original intent, and because of that, and because of the hiring rates that are currently on the DNA analysts, which are currently in high market demand, the commission approved this hiring rate from $63,960 to $86,176, with the intent that it now will require some DNA experience and be over, in effect, both phases of the laboratory, which basically makes a lot of logical sense. So the commission is asking for your approval, and I just want to say too, this rate is consistent with similar size jurisdictions. So this, I think, will basically help the department recruit and retain a person for the position. I'll be happy to answer any questions on this.
Thank you, Mr. Hagman. Is this position any associated with the consent decree? You know,
It impacts because you want to improve governmental services, which is basically the philosophy, of the consent decree, in addition to providing, in effect, expansion of community responsibilities that the department should keep in mind with. But this is definitely it's basically a requirement whether or not the consent decree was in place. It's basically like the technology of crime laboratories, as you see by all the television shows, have greatly expanded. So this basically position we'll be able to pay a more competitive rate to get a person in this high demand occupation.
all right, thank you. Seeing or hearing no comments from my colleagues, Mr. Harang, are there any public comments?
There are no comments on this item.
Thank you. I'll move adoption.
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Jeruso. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
5 yeas, aye, 5 yeas, no nays, and the motion's approved. 21-100. Motion moves to the full council. Councilmember Jeruso,
Yes, sir.
do you, you say you needed to go and,
I'm here for 20 more minutes, but unfortunately have meetings that were stacked up at this time that I pushed back to noon. So I'm good till noon.
let's finish up with the ordinances and then we could go to the sales tax presentation. Next, we have budget ordinance. That's agenda item number 8, 33,255 and 256.
Good morning, council members.
Good morning, UOB.
So ordinance calendar numbers 33,255 and 33,256. These ordinances appropriate federal grant funds from intergovernmental transfers to the fire department for the Assistance to Firefighters Grant, the Fire Prevention and Safety Grant, and the fiscal year 19 Port Security Grant. So these grants are rollover grants. 2 of them are from fiscal year 2018, and one of them, again, is from fiscal year 2019. It will total up to $204,000. And what this does is fund other operating equipment and supplies for the fire department. We have representatives from the fire department here to speak if you have any specific questions on the operations and some of the things with the programming.
Thank you, Mr. Shai. Would the fire department like to add anything?
Morning, council member. No, I think we're fine unless you all have any questions for us.
Good morning, Mr. Spector. Just briefly, give us a little overview of how you plan to use the $200,000 grant for the supplies.
It's divided between 3 different grants. 2 of them are rollovers from 2018. One of them is to sustain our smoke alarm installation program. The 2018, that's the 2018 FP&S. The 2018 AFG has a little over $3,000 remaining, which will help us wrap out our project that installs hard suction hoses and portable master stream devices on some of our apparatus. And then the 2019 Port Security Grant, which is the lion's share that is for chemical detection, and radiation detection devices.
Thank you, Mr. Spector. Definitely the money for all of it is to good use. But you specified the money for the smoke installation. That has been a great service to the community that you all, the fire department provides, knowing that many of our citizens pay, alerting people from fires. So thank you all. Thank you for your service. Councilmember Palmer, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I did. I love this program. Y'all used to help us when I was in my 20s when we would do it with Christmas in October and then with Rebuilding Together. How many are y'all doing a year in terms of smoke alarm installation?
Those numbers are a little bit off right now because of the pandemic.
Right.
So drastically slowed. I can email you those numbers later. I have some more specific numbers in my email.
Okay.
Track for purposes of the grant. But this one, we have a little over $24,000 remaining, $25,000 remaining to spend. 25-ish of which is federal funds and about 1,200 of which is local funds. And probably in the ballpark of another several thousand smoke alarms that we can purchase and install before the end of this grant.
Okay. Do you also do carbon monoxide?
Not with this grant award.
Okay. Yeah, if I could get that information, I'd really appreciate that. And also, if I know you probably you can't give addresses, but maybe like geographic areas, like where the most where you've been installing the most would be helpful.
I will see if we can find that information and I will make sure to email you.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Spector, and I will move approval.
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Jeruso. Are there any public comments?
No public comments on this item.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. 5 yeas, no nays. Ordinance is approved. 33,255 and 56 goes to full council. Agenda number 9, next ordinance. Mr. Shai, you.
You're on mute.
You're on mute.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
So we have ordinance calendar number 33257. This ordinance transfers funds within the Department of Parks and Parkways from personal services to other operating, as well as the purchase of supplies and equipment. It's about $321,000. The issue really with this ordinance was it's just a product of what's going on with the new system and things like that. We just really trying to correct the appropriation mix for Parks and Parkways relative to the millage funding. We had the first year rollout of Questica and things like that, where the data kind of manifested in a certain way. So now we are going through, you will see this with the next ordinance with Nord C, just correcting those things, just to make sure we're aligning the budget with the actual activity. So we also have a member of Parks and Parkways here for any specific questions pertaining to that. So I'll just open the floor for that.
Thank you, Yubi. Parks and Parkways, have anything to add?
I don't think I have anything to add. The personal services funds that will remain in personal services for that code support the FTEs that are there, and the remainder balance of the 321 is what's going to operating.
I'm sorry, can you identify yourself, please?
I'm sorry, Rebecca Grubb. I apologize. The
Thank
budget
you.
coordinator for Parkways.
Mr. Harang, are there any public comments?
No comments on this item.
Okay. We'll move adoption.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Jeruso. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? 5 yeas, no nays, and ordinance 33,257 is approved and moves to the full council. Next, agenda item 33,258. Relative to North Sea, 1.3 million internal transfer of funds from operating to personnel to support the millage-related activities.
As the council member stated, this is an ordinance to transfer funds within North Sea, and it's going from other operating to personal services. Again, like I mentioned with Parks and Parkways, this ordinance is being done just to correct the appropriation mix for this agency to properly fund the activity. It's just a product of, like I said, the new system, Questica, and getting that data in there and making sure it's reflecting the actual activity. We have Ms. Tamikia Dunkley from North Sea, if there are any specific questions related to the programming.
So I don't have anything to add. Like you said, council members, this is a correction of the millage appropriation.
And Ms. Dunkley, is this the transfer, is this the intent to hire additional personnel?
So it's to hire back to the levels we were pre 2021 cut. As the council members are aware, all of the agencies had to enact a percentage cut of personnel, and unfortunately, majority of NORAD's budget is personnel. So this would sustain the levels of recreational and cultural programming throughout for our citizens.
Thank you. Council members, are any questions? Seeing no questions, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Palmer. All in favor?
Yes.
Aye. 5 yeas. 5 yeas, no nays, and motion's approved. The ordinance is approved. 33,258 moves to the full council. Mr. Harang, was there any public comment?
No, sir, no comment on this item.
Next up, item number 11, ordinance numbers 33,259 and 260.
Ordinance calendar numbers 33,259 and 33,260, they're to appropriate grant funds awarded by the Department of Health and Human Services to the Mosquito, Termite, and Rodent Control Board for the CDC Environmental Public Health and Emergency Response Grant Program. So the funding for this program will go to creating working groups to gather data as it's related to rodent control. We have Ms. Claudia Rico here. Dr. Claudia Rico can speak to any questions about the program.
Good morning. Morning. So this is a grant funded. We applied for a grant from the CDC and we were awarded it. It's actually going to be a 5-year program. And so what we're trying to do here is really create the infrastructure for rodent surveillance, right? So we want to be the center of expertise as it pertains to rodent control in the US. And it's a group of folks, and we are looking at data, not only rodent data, like rodent population data, pathogens, but we're also looking at those conducive conditions, such as environmental data, the locations of garbage cans, and all these other factors. And so that we can make good decisions on how to best manage rodent control. So we've got folks that work with us, University of Miami, people from all over the country. So.
Thank you, Ms. Rigo. Councilmember Palmer.
Yeah, I just want to say, Claudia, thanks so much. Y'all are just so aggressive getting grants, and you do such a great job with that. So thank you for doing that. That really is an added benefit to the public, especially being able to leverage our limited resources. So
really appreciate it. So we've made a lot of impact, right, in the last year in the French Quarter.
Yeah,
and,
that's what I was going to bring up.
Yeah, please make sure everybody's following us on social media. We've got some great training and we're going to be pushing out information about dumpster management and how it relates to rodents, but that's all related, to that grant. And it's just better awareness in general.
Thank you so much, Claudia. Appreciate your service.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to jump in as, Councilmember Palmer. Claudia, thank you for your leadership. But I do look forward to our board meeting coming up as soon as we can. I know you guys have been very busy, but thank you so much for your leadership as well.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you, Doc. Thank you, Councilmember Nguyen and Councilmember Palmer. Thank you, Dr. Rigo, as well. I know as the weather days get warmer and you'll be even busier preparing your department and preparing the public I'm sure we all welcome the warm weather, but we all have to be prepared relative to the mosquito control.
Oh yeah, everything's already ready to go. So our vehicles have been serviced and our airplane will be ready within the next couple of weeks because it has mandatory service. But we've been doing surveillance. It's 24/7 now. We do it 12 months a year, and we're starting our surveillance locations for tires and swales and looking for larvae. So yeah, it's up and running. But yes, I like cold weather. So
just the opposite. Thank you. Do you have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Jeruso.
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Moreno. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
5 yeas, no nays. Mr. Harang, is there any public comment?
No comment on this one, Councilmember.
Thank you. 33,259 is ordinance is approved and moves to full council. Next up, last ordinance, agenda item number 12, 33,261 and 62. Shad?
Our last two ordinances, ordinance calendar numbers 33,261 and 33,262. They appropriate federal grant funds awarded to the Department of Health by the Unity Safe at Home Rapid Rehousing Grant Program to provide rapid rehousing case management to homeless individuals and families. So this program will prioritize individuals who are unsheltered, residing in emergency shelters or in temporary non-congregate shelters and are at high risk for COVID. We have Ms. Brandy DeLarge here to speak to any specifics on the operational side for this program. And here she is.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Large.
How are you?
Good. As it relates to operations in the field in the city, I guess two questions. And one, how many individuals will benefit from the case management services of the 100,000? And then we are seeing Interstate 610 runs through District D. Of course, it runs through District A as well. We're seeing an uptick of expansion of homeless populations setting up tents. This has been communicated to the health department, but it's 610 in Elysian Fields and 610 in Franklin Avenue. And wondering how we could get permanent relief, of temporary relief, to get these individuals into a shelter as it relates to this particular ordinance and support.
Okay, so I'll start with that second one that you addressed. So the way this grant is set up, the budget, there's no line item specifically for us paying for the actual shelter, but it's going to be support for us to get them there. One of those items is to provide bus tokens to homeless individuals to help them. And our staff who will be out working with these individuals will also be able to provide resources and locations on where they can go, and also provide the hygiene kits. So when they do get to the shelter, they'll be set up. I will specifically bring these locations that you have identified to the program manager to make sure they're on the radar, whether it's for this grant or for other opportunities, because our normal Healthcare for the Homeless grant has funding to assist with these items as well. So we can bring that there. As far as the amount of people, that has not yet been identified by the program, but they're expecting to use those resources to provide the promotional items, different hygiene kits. And as I look through their documentation, they do not have a number identified just yet on the amount of population. But I can inquire and email you that information.
Thank you, Mr. Lodger. Appreciate that. Councilmember Jerusalem, you had something or no? You good?
For once, I'm going to be quiet.
Right.
Well, since you're going to be quiet, Councilmember Russo, I just want to take this opportunity again to thank the entire health department for what they're doing. They've also, and another department that have consistently leveraged public dollars and resources with grant funding. And it's tremendous what they do. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Palmer. Thank you, Mr. Large. Mr. Harang, are there any public comments?
No comments on this item.
Thank you. And would entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
So moved by Councilmember Jeruso, seconded by the chair. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Five yeas, no nays, and ordinance 33,261 is approved and moved to full council. And I would request these ordinance be placed on the council's consent agenda. Thank you. That completes all the ordinances and motions on today's agenda. We will go. Thank you, Yubi. We will go back to agenda item number 5, sales tax collections analysis by industry. This presentation is City's Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Norman White, who I think will also be accompanied by Mr. Randall McElroy, who will provide us with the breakdowns on the city's sales tax revenues from actually 2018 to current. I want to thank Mr. White and the administration for putting this presentation together. This is very helpful as the city looks and veers to recover from COVID-19 and the pandemic. It's especially important that we know our strengths, what our strengths and weaknesses are. A breakdown of the city sales tax data by industry provides important indicators as we contemplate the next steps into our future and look to make informed policy decisions. I join in my council colleague, Council President Helena Moreno, who has requested this agenda item from last month's Budget Committee meeting. As you know, we all are concerned about our businesses who make up the backbone of our city and who have very struggled deeply to make ends meet over the past year. And so I'm going to, before Mr. White, you kick it off, I want to turn it over to my colleague, Council President Moreno.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for pushing forward with this presentation. And thank you, of course, to Mr. White and Mr. McElroy for putting it together for us. Yeah, I mean, I think this is good. This is really good to provide data-driven guidance as to what industries and what businesses are going to need the most help, so that we have, you know, really a tremendous recovery for our city, that no businesses are left behind, no small businesses are left behind. This is all about finding the best ways to get people back to work. And it's with this type of data that I'm so grateful for Mr. White and Mr. McElroy for putting together, so that not only us as the council can see, but also so that the public can see as well what businesses have been impacted the worst. And so I'll let you all move forward with the presentation, but some things that I saw in here are actually a bit surprising to me. But with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to have them begin their presentation.
Thank you, Councilmember Moreno. Mr. White.
Yes, thank you. Actually, those were great things. I don't think I need to add to it. The only thing I would add to it, if I can, is simply as we go into a recovery period, right? And what we're attempting to do is make sure that we move into this area and out of it, restoring our revenue base. And I think this goes a long way of indicating where those losses occurred, and at some point over a 3 to 5 year horizon, understand how we grow our expenditures and match that, so we now have sustainable recovery. And I think by asking for this information, I think the public will get an idea of what those things are, and how we begin to direct support and then begin to grow it, not only just from the revenue standpoint, but also bringing back employment, reducing costs, and at that point give us a real leap into what we consider into our future. I think all those things are going to be important, but I'll turn it over to Mr. McElroy, who's got the details of what you asked for, but thank you.
Thank you, Mr. White.
All right, thank you. May we share, does the clerk have a copy to share, or can I share my screen?
You should be able to share your screen. If not, I can advance the slides for you. That's your preference.
Okay, now working the tech will be the next problem. Let's see. Okay. All right, so I believe we're all looking at this same presentation here now. So we started off, let's see, okay, the intro. We have 2018 and 2019 in here to give us baselines. 2020 was special for reasons we all know, and 2021 is still special. Hopefully not as special as last year. But you can see for bars, we get a fairly consistent pattern throughout the year in 2018 and 2019. The drop off in 2019 in December there is an artifact of the cyber attack. You'll notice 2020 starts very high. That's because those revenues that would have been posted were just put into January. But otherwise, you know, the pattern continues pretty evenly. And then, of course, drops off fantastically. I should note, too, these are sales taxes are reported a month back. So the numbers you're looking at are really the activity for a previous month, which makes a lot of sense out of this pattern. You know, we don't have, for example, November is always a little high, but that's really a peak for October. You know, when the weather's still pretty reasonable, people are festive, etc. I also want to note, we're going to have bars here and also restaurants. These are grouped by categories from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and there's a little bit of bleed between these two categories. Some of this relies on self-classification of the business and then is reviewed by BLS personnel. There are some things that slide through or aren't very clear or could plausibly fit into either category. So we want to take these two categories together in your mind. But of course, the drop off in drinking places here is, you know, exactly what we'd expect. Pretty brutal, really.
Just real quick, Mr. McElroy.
Yeah.
So if we're calculating it from, let's say, the 1918 numbers, because I get it on the cyber attack piece where it peaked up to the 3 million mark. But if we're taking a look, let's say roughly close to the 2 million mark of the beginnings of 19 and 18, if we start there and we look at the overall biggest drop off that we saw in 2020 down to below the $500,000 mark in July, roughly June into July. So that's 75% roughly decrease, right?
Yes, this is, as you can see,
significant.
It definitely. Now, of course, bars were not down to zero because there were, to-go orders, some places with outdoor, the various things, but basically, and of course, in June and July, if you have an outdoor area, it's considerably less pleasant than in other months. So we would expect to see a drop. That was fairly alarming to me when I saw it, just for the magnitude. But we, I guess, by that point, we're used to the fact that this was a new reality, and hopefully that it would get better, which eventually it did. So also, there is just a slight bit of month-to-month variation. Of course, with 2020, the variation there makes sense, and for the drop-off in December 2019. But you'll notice, of course, there's a slight amount of variation. There's not necessarily a story to compare, for example, between January 2018 and January 2019. Even with that random variation, the pattern for 2020 is very clear. In 2021, we're off to a
Randall, right quick. Would you state the reason why November 2020 it states 2.6 million? Would that be because that was around the time we moved to a phase 3 for the first time?
The phased impacts definitely show up in significant steps. There's also the general festive periods throughout the year, but for 2020, a bigger factor was these expansion or the change of the phases to allow more return, slightly to normal. Definitely a factor, yes. And this year, we expect that people haven't been pent up will, when they are allowed to, will perhaps go a little bit above normal levels of activity for a while. But we definitely should see these. We didn't mark the phases, the different restriction phases on here, but it very much correlates, yes. Thank you for bringing that up. If we're good on bars, we can go to grocery stores, which are fairly consistent. You'll see there was a slight increase through all of 2020. I guess it helped grocery stores that they were businesses that were allowed to stay open as being essential. So they picked up a little bit of extra business that probably would have gone to bars and restaurants. And then you can see, of course, the dip early on when we weren't really sure what was happening. And then once the restrictions came in and everybody stocked up, and we're basically now returning fairly well to normal for grocery stores. I don't, unless there are other questions, I don't have much of a story on this one.
Yeah, Mr. McElroy, just also to clarify, if I may, this also includes like your corner stores, your gas stations. This is more packaged liquor, correct?
Gas stations are in a separate category.
Okay.
Thank you for bringing that up. We did not show it, I don't believe, in this presentation. There's a lot of noise in that category as well. But there is definitely packaged liquor sales from, or liquor sales from grocery stores would be included in this. I don't have a breakdown from them, but I expect a lot of that bump is from extra liquor. But then, of course, also, some of them that have hot food or really any kind, any kind of food you could use as a substitute for a restaurant. Yes,
I just want to say to council members, this is a really important comparison to the previous slide when you talk about bars and potentially restaurants, because, again, it's separated by classes of different types of permits as well, I'm assuming. And that's something that we're going to be talking about tomorrow when we talk about how is there potential to give some relief. As we know, these ABO licenses are coming due April 1st, but the reality is there are two different classes, right? You have class A, which is restaurants and bars, which would fit in the first slide. And then you have class B, which is package store, which obviously doesn't really need relief. So I just wanted to make that statement. So thank you so much, Mr. McElroy.
Sure. And of course, grocery stores, in addition to being essential in that they serve groceries, it's also much easier to distance, take the kinds of precautions in a large grocery store that are necessary to combat the spread of the virus versus inside of a bar, which is much smaller. I'll move on. Hotels and motels. This is another story that we knew was coming, and it's a very, very sad story. Once again, the December 2019 cyber attack, that revenue, which would have declined slightly from November, but not as drastically as it does, would be is pushed back into 2020. But otherwise, this is the same sort of thing. We can also see here the decline is pretty stark and stays that way. It doesn't pick back up in the way that bars did, because hotels and motels, a lot of these are trips that people take from out of town. You have to book the trip in advance. Of course, we have a lot of conventions and concerts and other events that we normally would have in a year were not held this year, so that hotels didn't see any kind of the recovery that some of the other industries had. There was a slight boost, later in the year, but we're still very, very far down from normal. This one will probably lag as well because we have to. People have to schedule trips in advance if they want to visit. Conventions will be scheduled a year in advance. Large concerts, these things are well planned out, so that they're suppose we magically were all cured and able to reopen tomorrow, it would still then take a long time to book a lot of events for hotels and motels. So we'll keep our eyes on this one, but we expect it to be lower than, for example, bars or other things for a while. Okay. Online orders, predictably, is doing very well right now, with a lot of stores either closed or restricted, and a lot of people having extra money to spend that they would have spent perhaps in bars or in restaurants. That is, they're spending less. In addition to general safety concerns, people don't want to leave the house unless they have to. Online orders are significantly up. We expect this one to continue for a while as well. Even when we return more or less to equilibrium, I expect this to be a little higher. It's not 100% clear, so I don't want to speculate too much, but this is just basically doing very strong and should continue that way for a while.
Randall, how, can you provide to the public how is the city improving over time their collection of online sales taxes?
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. I don't have too many details right now in front of me, so I wouldn't want to say too much. Since this has become the revenue collection has, in the last few years has slightly broadened out. We are collecting more and more, and of course, online shopping just in general as a general phenomenon is not going to go away. So that the pool of collections is getting slightly broader over time as well. It's hard to tell which part of the effect is from which cause, so I wouldn't want to say too much more. Norm may have something to add there.
Yes, and I think, Councilman, I think your question was pretty much directed towards there are some things that we collect directly in the city, and others we have to go through the state to collect. And as we begin to grow those things and work with the state a little more closely, that we expect that we'll get better at collection. Right now it is, and we are in cooperation is occurring. And as you know, central tax collection is an issue. And so what we're doing is we're staying in communication with the state, and we're doing what we can to ensure that we're collecting the appropriate amount of dollars. And so as Randall, Mr. McElroy spoke to, is that we do expect this to kind of stay where it is, and folks to now begin to patronize this particular area because they're not familiar with it. But we will continue to grow. We will always work with the state to ensure that we get the appropriate amount of money that should be directed towards the city of New Orleans.
Thank you, Mr. White.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, so if we're covered on online orders, I will move on to pharmacies and drugstores. This one is not, there's not a lot of a story here. These were essential, they kept going. There was a slight dip at first, just from it looks like from the early confusion about the virus, what were the risks of going out, et cetera. But once we got the safety measures in place and learned a little bit more about it, this is pretty much a pretty constant industry. Doesn't change a lot, doesn't fluctuate. There are, of course, the base sort of anchor things of people that have need prescriptions filled, et cetera. Those are very regular, don't tend to change month to month that much. And the other businesses, that's attached to that, pretty similar. So again, not much of a story. I won't dwell on it unless there's a question. All right, let's do restaurants. Again, just to repeat the earlier point, restaurants and bars conceptually are different, but some restaurants or many restaurants serve alcohol, some bars serve food. There is a little bit of bleed in here. So we'll keep these two categories together in our minds. And the same thing with the December 2019 drop-off was from the cyber attack. So the revenue was posted a little later, but was there. And if you make that correction, we wanted to leave it in just so you could see the effect. But if you sort of mentally adjust for that, looks pretty stable through 2018, 2019. And then, of course, the pandemic happened. We don't. So some restaurants, closed either temporarily or permanently. Other restaurants that were able to continue operating, would do to-go orders. Places that had outside areas that were safe to have customers in kept going. But of course, large drop-off there. This one is relatively stable into this year, so we don't have a great picture of the recovery, or a great theoretical future picture of the recovery for this one. But of course, people like to go out to eat. When the restaurants are back open, we expect people will go in them, especially if they've been vaccinated, safety protocols followed, et cetera. So again, this is just a story we have to keep watching. You can see, so that, by the way, we've been looking at the shapes of a lot of these, but business dropped to about a third for restaurants relative to previous years. Continues like that right now, but it's not clear. I don't really expect them to go right back to the normal equilibrium line, too soon. But I do expect that to creep up a little bit. And you notice the nicer weather, it picks up slightly there.
Here's what I think is interesting, Mr. McElroy, about this chart compared to the chart from the bars. So in the 2021 section of the bars, you're seeing the spike up. But on the restaurant side, you're seeing still just kind of this flat line staying around the, as you mentioned, the roughly 30%. They had a 70% decrease. The city did in receipts. So that's what I find interesting. So my question to you is, as we're looking at restaurants, is it all combined with full service restaurants and fast food as well?
This category, I believe, BLS has several ways to, categorize almost anything, but this one, I believe, includes things like a sit down kind of place versus a drive-through. I believe that's all included in this category here.
So you're saying that they are all included: fast food, drive-through, and full service.
I believe so, yes.
And the reason why I mentioned that is because I think if we were able to separate out the fast food component, you would see an even greater reduction in tax receipts if we were just, or in business, really, if we were looking at the full service restaurants. Because and they're having a heck of a time trying to recover for a variety of different reasons, even though now they can open up to, I believe it's now 75%. A lot of it has to do with still the spacing of the tables. It has to do with trying to hire back employees. But I do believe that it's on the recovery of not just bars, but restaurants, also particularly the full service restaurants that are going to need a great deal of help and assistance for quite some time. And, I know Mr. White, we've had some preliminary conversations about this, and I know Mr. Montano and I have had conversations about this as well, that as that stimulus money comes in, I do think it is important to be able to create some type of grant program to help stand up some of our restaurants and bars so that they can, make payroll for upcoming months, and so that they can be eventually brought back to where they were before. But to your point, Mr. McElroy, we really need to follow this closely, because I think it's going to take some time before they get up to where they had been in 2020 and, not 2020, but 2019 and 2018. I think it's going to take, it's going to be a hard road ahead for our full service restaurants, particularly those restaurants that are not part of a bigger conglomerate, where it's a single owner, one restaurant. Those are the folks who are really going to need additional assistance from the city, and see what can be done to get them back to where they were.
Yes, thank you for bringing that point up. That is an excellent point. A lot of the drive-through fast food kind of places were not very much affected, stayed open for the drive-through, which is already a large component of the business. The full service restaurant industry, of course, not only is it world famous in New Orleans, and it's one of the big points of pride, but it was definitely very hard hit relative to, most of the other industries we're talking about. And of course, for a drive-through, we don't, the people can wear personal protective equipment. They could, change the safety protocol a little, but it's not, it doesn't affect them as much as it would for a full service restaurant, as you mentioned, having the table spaced, capacity restrictions, et cetera. Very big concern, right, for the full service industry. We don't have finer grained information than that, unfortunately, but certainly this is something everybody's aware of, and we're monitoring.
If I can add this, you're right. Certainly, if we're looking at for a backstop position for our drive-through, that caused us to not drop so far, right, off the cliff, if you will. And so you're right about that. And as we begin to open the city back up at the percentage level, depending on what the medical community state as far as the pandemic situation, you can see that correlation. I think that was your point. In fact, if you restaurants and bars and motels and hotels all have a strong correlation to those particular issues. And you're right. So the key would be is that as events start to come back, we expand and we move towards herd immunity, and things starts to move, then we'll expect that number to start to climb as well. But what we're attempting to do as we begin to look at some of the stimulus money coming in is look at not just what's directed towards the city, but a broader sentiment, right? That there's a great deal of money, not just coming to the city, but there's going to businesses, and clearly there's some going to individuals. And hopefully what we can do is take advantage of all of that to ensure all of our citizens, including businesses, take advantage of it, because all that becomes a circulation within our economy to help grow this in a long-term effort. So we're hopefully what we're seeing as we begin to vaccine begin to move throughout, our percentage go up. We expect the correlation to occur here as events start to become go online. So you're right about that. That is going to be a slow growth area, but it certainly have a direct correlation to those other events.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I would absolutely agree with you. And it's just, but still we have to be realistic and know, and I know the restaurateurs know that it's going to be still a long road back to get to where they were before. And just the ones that survived all the way through, I want to make sure that we do everything possible to make sure that they do survive until they get back to where they were before. You know, unfortunately, we lost some restaurants and some of them even lost their location, so they won't be back. And that's really a big tragedy. It's really terrible. So for those who did make it this long, I just want to make sure that, and I know you're committed to, Mr. White, and I've already had conversations with Mr. Montano, and I know you all are already working on this, but some type of way to help these particular small business owners continue to make it and be back to where they were. And hopefully, you know, down the road, even better than they were. That's really should be our goal and our plan really for this recovery and revival of New Orleans.
Absolutely. As you said, we are committed to that. The mayor is certainly committed to that. And I think we look forward into the near future of the program that we're putting in place to ensure those things that happen. So we stand in the same area with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
And, Councilmember Palmer. Randall, I just wanted to clarify one thing you said earlier. Did you say the conditional AR permits where restaurants sell, where bars sell food, did you say that was baked into this restaurant year-to-year comparison, or did you say it was baked in the bars, the first slide?
That should have also been for restaurants. There were a variety of the phases there. I couldn't remember all the restrictions off the top of my head, but the numbers we're seeing should reflect also those various, for one, the phases, which are scheduled. We know those publicly. Also for when permits were issued, which I don't have access to plot that out on the graph, but the numbers do include the effects of the various permit schemes. Yes.
Councilmember Palmer.
Thank you, Budget Chair. I just wanted to add a few things. It's been, I think this last slide also shows just the difference in operating costs between restaurants and bars as well, and their higher employee numbers, and what that's done to the economy. Just to I've been in contact with the LRA, and to really put this into context, the job losses in this industry are 20,000 year over year. And in terms of our local restaurants that we have lost, we're looking at anywhere between 15 and 20%. And many of them may not come back. And a lot of them that are still struggling, we have to remember that they had a triple whammy this year, right? Not just from the pandemic, but then having to pay their property taxes up front, right? Not being able to open during Mardi Gras, and then now having these ABO licenses due within 2 weeks. And so again, I think when we talk about immediate relief, it's something that I'm really hoping that we all look at. And I know we're going to discuss that further tomorrow. But one of the things we have to remember is some of these rules and regulations, like we said, with the stimulus money, we're still not sure how they're going to shake out. And so we have to look at what we can do immediately. And even if it's a deferral over a longer period of time until we get what those rules and regs are. But at the end of the day, some of them are struggling. And if they can't open, they may never open. And if we can provide something immediately, it would be great. And also, some of these restaurants and bars are not going to be available potentially for stimulus because they had to physically close because of their sizes, because they couldn't make numbers work. And they had paid a lot of these fees last year. And even though they paid them front on, they weren't able to utilize them because they were closed. And so again, I just hope that when we have a deeper conversation about this tomorrow, we take all this into consideration, because they do represent, the restaurants represent a very large body of employment, and our employment numbers that just came out yesterday are pretty stark. So thank you so much, and I do appreciate y'all bringing this information to the council. Thank you, Councilman Moreno, and thank you, Budget Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Palmer. Curious about one thing, and I worked in the hospitality industry and hotels, as well as I was a waiter, and worked in a wedding venue. And so I'm just curious about the analysis. What about the impacts of the pandemic, and were y'all able to capture through the sales tax collections? What about event rental spaces and entertainment venues?
Through the chair, certainly we're able to do that. What we tried to bring forth in this presentation is pretty much your larger areas that we think had a larger impact, but there's a assortment of selections that we can begin to look at. Clearly, the greater effect of what you saw here was restaurant, bars, and motel and hotel. But we do have those particular outcomes on a granular level. So, yes.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I think you're fine. That was my answer. We certainly have it all, yes.
Okay, sending it to us is appreciated. We appreciate what you provided to us. thus far, and this is a great great breakdown for us to get a snapshot of where the city is and has been to current date from 2018 to now. So I was just curious about those event rental spaces and entertainment venues being the city we are as far as entertainment.
If I can, those would, and we look at those, you know, just like we look at these. And if I can give you an idea, those were pretty much on the lines of hotels and motels, right? Because as things shut down, so did those events occur too. So that correlation would be strong towards as we begin to open up and bring events back. We expect that to continue to climb. But I can give you the details of it, but just for this conversation, you would look at hotels and motels to be similar to that level of activity you just spoke to.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. And it'd be appreciated if y'all could continue to give us up to date, I guess, a fill in the blank, if you would. I imagine this is almost what Mr. White, you and I were talking about, and CAO about the actuals, the exacts, and the graphs with our new budget system.
Absolutely. I mean, this is going to be the barometer we use to see how we're recovering and to ensure that as we begin to grow expenditures to bring our program and services back, we got to ensure that these things that we talked about today and the other granular things start to return as well. And these are the tools that we're using to ensure that is appropriately addressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. White. Mr. Harang, were there any public comments on this presentation number 5?
There is a comment on all of the reports together. We could read that out now, or we can wait until the reports are complete.
We'll wait till it's complete. We go on to the personnel spending forecast. Mr. McElroy, or you be? Yep.
Yeah, I'll be presenting that. So this is the 2021 personal services spending projection. This date is as of March 9th. I just want to make sure everybody's aware that this is a snapshot in time. What we use is the most recent available payroll data to project personnel expenditures for the remainder of the year. The most recent available data for the admin side has been February 20th, and the most recent available data on the police fire side is February 27th. So if you look at the report, you will see some areas where we have some deficits, right? So this is the beginning of the year. We are projecting very early on, and this doesn't account for any type of management activities that we are planning to take to rectify these situations. So a lot of this information is really indicative of the attrition and furlough savings that we had to kind of impose for the 2021 budget. So as we begin to address those budgetary issues through additional funding measures and things like that, we will start to, you'll start to see the numbers change. You'll start to see some of these deficits kind of correct themselves. So as we continue to manage, you will see us, these numbers manifest differently to get to a certain level, which will reflect our recurring revenue and kind of make sure we're in a manageable level. So if there aren't any other questions or any comments on it, that will conclude my presentation on the report.
Seeing no questions, you could move to revenue. I believe that is Mr. McElroy.
Hand it off to Randall.
All right, thank you, Yubi. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Shall I share my screen again? Would that be the easiest? Okay. Before we get into specific remarks about specific things, I'd like to say early in the year, it's the numbers can look, I don't know, substantially different than the pattern early in the year, just in terms of when things are paid, when things are posted. Payment timing in general can, for a lot of things can vary slightly, but the effect appears larger than it really is early in the year. So let me just preface everything by saying that as a specific example, we could lead right into property tax. Excuse me, there were some small delays in getting the bills out for various reasons. So the bills, ultimately were sent out, and we have some of the money in. Normally, in the first 2 months, we would expect to get almost all of it, like last year would be a typical year for that. This year, we are receiving the money. It's just on a slight lag, so it looks like less right now. However, this should be, once it's all up and accounted for, this should be, more than, certainly 65% of the budget looks bad when it's normally 89, 90, 91. It should be more like that once this comes in. So not a particular issue there.
We should probably see a more current, accurate picture of that line item property, in April.
Yeah.
If I can, through the chair, that is exactly correct. Because as you remember, we had a proposal on the ballot that ultimately deferred that extended the tax collection to the end of February. And so what you begin to see is a posting that will occur after then. And so around April, that will give you the March data. You'll start to see us recover from this respect. I think that's what you're saying. Yes.
Exactly right. That's we will catch up on that, and I believe it should be right on pace. I don't see any. The number is low currently due to this slight lag, but in the long run, I don't see any particular problem in property tax. Okay, so moving on to other taxes, pretty similar actually to last year. Unfortunately, slightly lower levels, mainly due to sales tax and hotel and motel tax. However, again, this is about on schedule from what we expected, and I don't knowing that everything's going to be a little lower than in previous years at this point. Everything else is about on schedule with other tax category. Licenses and permits, this year is actually slightly more normal in terms of schedule. Licenses, the safety and permits section was very heavily affected by the cyber attack, such that the posting for these items earlier last year was incredibly delayed. So this year is really the normal year in that sense of the timing of the payments. Otherwise, we're about on schedule, what we predicted here. Nothing really super concerning here. I want to point out for line 27, occupational licenses. We, excuse me one second. I'm sorry, I've got a toddler running around upstairs. For 27 occupational licenses, the deadline this year was extended slightly on that. So of course the payments come in later if the deadline is extended, but that ought to catch up probably by the next report. I expect that will catch up. Taxi tour guide licenses, I believe is more of a reporting issue. I mean, that of course is going to be significantly lower in terms of tours and things, but that's mainly reporting there. Building permits has some kind of natural fluctuation, so it's hard to draw a conclusion that really holds up to scrutiny, I guess. It's significantly greater this year than last year, but there is I think the month-to-month variation on that covers that. And again, we're basically on schedule here. We expected far fewer mayoralty permits, so we have collected kind of a lot of what we expected. So the percentage is up, although the absolute amount is down. And that's basically the story for licenses and permits.
Randall, I would say on the building permits, of course, in 2020, I know wasn't much development in building because of the pandemic. I was kind of, and I know we do from 1 year comparison to the other, the previous, but how far off do you think we may have to build back up to what we were in 2019? I see we went almost a 10% jump from last year, from 9% to 17%.
Yeah, well, I thank you for the question. We have, again, like I said, there's some month-to-month variation in that, and with only showing 2 months, I don't want to speculate too much on that. This, of course, by the way, would have been before the pandemic really, I guess we saw it in the headlines, but it hadn't really hit home yet last year. I would have to go back and dig into some of my other numbers more detailed to get back with you specifically about the recovery for building permits. But I think this is one of those line items that's not particularly cyclical. It's smoothing out these various month-to-month things just in the long run in general goes fairly smoothly, and I think we're going to do okay on that this year. Actually, again, more specifically, I would have to circle back with you.
Thank you, Councilmember Paul.
Yes, thank you. I know there has been, I think, a significant amount too of transactions in terms of the real estate market, which is why I think if you look at the document transaction tax, I'd like to know if that's why it's reflective of jumping up so much.
That definitely, yes, Councilmember, that definitely appears to be the case. A lot of activity with this, which should. We'll probably continue at increased levels for a little bit past once we return to normal, just for the sorting out of resources that have, businesses that have sold or closed or that sort of thing. But that does explain it, yes.
Right. Yeah. So there has been, I know in the beginning of this year, the first quarter, there's a significant amount of building new home construction, which I think we can talk about later, why we need to beef up our safety and permits and our permitting process. But I'm anticipating that's going to be continuing for the next 18 months. And we should probably continue to see an increase in building permits as well.
If I can, through the chair, you're right about that. I think we also have to add into the fact, if you recall, we had the cyber attack. It took us a while to get the llama system going again. And so the data was recovering around this period. So you'll begin to see around the July period, when we get to that point, comparing 2020 data to 2021, we'll start to get significantly closer. And then it'll show just what we consider the increase in what I believe Councilmember Palmer was just speaking to. But at this point, you have a little bit of additive that goes into the recovery point of our llama system that records this data.
Right. So I think also, quite frankly, the building trades have also added to sales tax revenues. It would be interesting to see if there was a way we could break that out. But I think with the feds keeping 0% interest rates, we're going to continue to see increase in the housing market and new construction. And again, I'm just going to plug it again, which is why I think we really need to beef up our safety and permits office and make sure that we don't have any barriers to construction. But I know that's a different point, but I just want to thank you so much for the report. That's all, Budget Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Palmer. Randall.
Mr. Chair, I'll continue. Thank you. So in our next section, we have intergovernmental revenue. This is almost entirely a story of payment timing. So I wouldn't draw any specific conclusions out of this. The Medicaid UPL payment, for example, comes in, when it comes in. This year it's happened to come in at this point. Last year, it didn't come in until slightly later. There are several payments through the year, but they're not on any particular regular schedule. So I'm not alarmed by seeing it missing last year because we know that it just came in later. Most of these things are similar. So we're basically on track right now. No big issue with that. We do have, by the way, the 3.9 federal aid category, which I'm not sure how, of course, once if whatever relief money we receive, how it will get sliced up. I couldn't speculate what would go into this line item category, or if it would go into some of the miscellaneous lower in the report. But we are, of course, I guess this is my opportunity to point out, we are watching the whatever money comes in very carefully, just as everybody else in the city is. If we go to service charges, the main thing here of interest is general government includes a lot of money in collection fees on property taxes, so that if there is a delay in property tax collection generally, as we saw in the first category, it will also show up into 4-1, which explains why this is lower. Most of that money comes in, as in last year, very early on in the year. So that should catch back up once the other items, property tax items catch back up. Nothing too drastic there to worry about. Parking meters, 4.3, that's another one that, we saw a decline over the year last year, and will definitely expect, again, a lower than average year this year. Otherwise, things like indirect costs and state aid, and these are, again, kind of a payment timing thing. So we're nothing alarming there. Fines and forfeits is a big one that we saw a lot of this decline later after the timing in this report in 2019. I mean, in other words, after January and February, and which we expect to come back, partially. Parking ticket collections, we still expect to be down. As you notice, they're drastically down. Some of these other, impound and abandoned vehicles is not a large revenue item, but of course we expect that to be down as well. However, we hopefully should have bottomed out on things like the red light tickets, camera enforcement sort of things in 2019. So we're certainly keeping our eyes on that. The miscellaneous category, again, it's about $1 million off from this time last year. However, again, it's in these miscellaneous categories, there's payment timing issues and things come up throughout the year. So I don't expect a whole lot of interesting stories out of this one right now, other than interest, section 6-1. This is a problem just of interest rates being low, holding less cash in the bank, or having to manage this cash that we do have. So we knew interest would drop. It dropped last year, and we knew it would continue to be lower than usual. But we have built that in to the forecast this year, so we're still on target there. The transfer from other funds is at small amounts. And again, a lot of that is timing, so nothing super drastic there. So in sum here, once we put in the property tax money that normally we would have received, and this year just a slight lag, we're about on schedule where we would expect. The expectation is of course for less revenue relative to last year's expectation, but we have forecasted, we've basically accounted for this, and I don't want to be too optimistic, but it looks like we have nowhere to go but up as our vaccine distribution, becomes wider and more thorough, and hopefully we can start returning more to normal later this year. If there are any specific questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Move on. Thank you, Mr. McGarry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
The next report up will be the other operating expenditures, and I'll present that. So this report is a snapshot as of March 9th. It only captures the general fund expenditures. So you will see here we have a budget of 227 million. We have total obligations of 133 million, with total unobligated being 94 million. So I want to make a point of note on the unobligated amount, just to kind of level set and kind of get a little bit more context for everyone on the unobligated amount. So generally, you would expect agencies to expend their other operating because that's the plan for their activity. A lot of times when you see unobligated amounts, it will be due to delays, such as trying to get your requisition routed, a delay caused by the vendor, or some kind of management action to kind of curb spending. And then on the flip side of that, departments sometimes will also only encumber maybe 75% of the, their activity, right? Just to make sure they have contingencies for later on in the year, just because you just don't know what's going to happen. So as you look at this report, you should really consider the 94 million as things that will actually start to manifest in the obligations, right? So you should expect to see the total obligations climb. So to give you an example, the sheriff, right? So the sheriff, that's a mandated expenditure. So you should expect that funding amount to be expended. We have things like the light bill, we have things like TIFs, things like that, tax increment financing that we have to expend that will affect the figure that you see on this report. So every month you should see some shifts between not only the amount committed, encumbered, and expended, but also in the total unobligated amounts as well. So I just wanted to kind of level set that just so that we can kind of have a pretty solid foundation by which we can kind of review and talk about this report.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm opening the floor for any questions about anything on here or anything that I just, mentioned.
Thank you, Yubi. I have no questions. Seeing no questions from my colleagues, we can move on to the next one, which is pretty self-explanatory as well. It's the workforce status by department.
Yeah, so the last report, the status of the city's workforce, again, like all of our reports, this is just a snapshot in time of our leave status for employees. So as you can see, total employees are at 4,600, with percent on civil leave being 2.9%, percent on not civil leave is 97.1%, and then percent working remote is 20.4%. As you can see in some of the areas on the percent working remote, some agencies have 100% working remote. So as we continue to look at what's going on with COVID-19 and the activity around City Hall, these things will be revised as they submit operational plans to the CAO. I'm opening the floor for any questions on this as well.
Thank you, Yubi. We appreciate it. Ms. Arang, can we move to public comment, please?
Yes, sir. We have one public comment on this item from Justin Schmidt, not a paid representative. If I were using the patented and extremely effective Councilmember Palmer, how many days the Algiers Ferry has been out of commission flip chart for the number of days since council members Moreno and Palmer raised the pending issues surrounding the 1914 Edward Wisner Donation Trust, the chart would read 416. During that time, there was a second meeting in July 2020 and then an executive session at a council meeting earlier in the year. Nothing else has come forward. It is time to address this issue once and for all. That is the last comment for today's meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Harang. Being no other business, I want to thank everybody, members of the administration, the public, my colleagues, for a very productive meeting today. Seeing no other business, would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I just want to thank everyone who's on the administration side that has presented today. They've done a great job. Mr. McElroy, you handle your toddler with grace and ease under the circumstances, and I just want to thank you for that. This has been challenging on many levels. Y'all's department has really shown that you can pivot with all of this. So I just want to kudos to all of you, and Mr. White, and you will be.
Thank you.
Thank you all, and I'm hearing no motion to adjourn. So,
I'll move to adjourn. I'll move to adjourn.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Palmer, seconded by Councilmember Nguyen. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. 5 yeas, no nays, and we adjourn. Thank you all. Have a
Thank you,
good day.
Vice Chair.